You're listening to Dodge Movie Podcast. Your hosts are Christy and Mike Dodge, the founders of Dodge Media Productions. We produce films and podcasts, so this is a podcast about films. Join them as they share their passion for filmmaking.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Dodge Movie Podcast, and Happy New Year! Here we are, 2022. I love an even year, so I am hopeful and optimistic for this year, especially for our podcast, because we will have a full year. We already have planned out the movies that we're going to talk about this year, and if you want those lists, remember you can email me at christy@dodgemediaproductions.com. The email's in the show notes, and you can request that PDF of all of the movies we're going to talk about, so you get a little sneak peek. Also, I wanted to say that if you do want the list of last year's movies, you can also email me and I'll send you that too. All right, let's get started with, we are talking about all films Scottish. And the reason that we picked this is when I met Michael Dodge, he educated me about a little known holiday, unless you live in Scotland, where they celebrate Robbie Burns Day on Tuesday. Well, this year it'll be Tuesday, January 25th. And a Burns supper is a celebration of the life and poetry of the poet Robbie Burns, Scotland's son, right, Mike?
He's considered the poet laureate of Scotland. Some people also say that he is responsible for introducing the F word into the English language. Don't know if that's true or not, but that's a good one. And I will say there's a great tie-in to this film because on a Burns night supper, you traditionally serve haggis. And haggis is featured a little bit in this film.
Yes. And though we have never celebrated with haggis, I do believe on a couple of years I have made meatloaf because that's pretty close to a haggis type roast.
And at one of the Highland Games, we got deep fried haggis.
Yes.
Which, I mean, deep frying anything makes it better, I suppose, as long as it's savory. But it didn't really bear a lot of resemblance to haggis anymore. It was just kind of deep fried ground meat.
And it reminded me of meatloaf. I think that's why I said, like, okay, well, I won't commit to haggis, but I will commit to making meatloaf on January 25th. And I always tried to make Grandma Emmo's Scottish shortbread.
Yeah, that's good shortbread. But I will say that one of the things that one must bear in mind with haggis is the Scots were a poor people. So haggis was leftovers. It wasn't desired necessarily. And most Scots that I know nowadays don't actually like the stuff.
So was it not supposed to taste good, really? It was just utilizing what they had.
Yeah, it's using the leftovers. Just like other people in my family of origin would eat pig brains just because you had it around.
Yikes.
Yeah.
One other thing I want to add is in the spirit of Scotland and these movies that we have picked, we are currently sitting at 16 reviews. I would love to get us to 25 reviews. So if we get to 25, Mike has agreed to let me post a picture of him in his kilt from our wedding.
And that's a pretty big get. So
it is. He
it's
doesn't
worth
like
it.
he doesn't like pictures of himself out there. So this is big, you guys.
Right. I my own Stalin. I disappear myself from photos.
Yeah, we're only 9 away. Like 9 of you have to do it, and then you all get to benefit. So
okay. And if we go to 36, I'll include a special bonus photo.
Okay, why 36?
Well, 16 is 4 squared and 25 is 5 squared, so I went to 6 squared.
Oh, see, I picked 25 because it was a round number, but it's Robbie Burns' birthday. I mean, he was born on January 25th. So, okay, you guys, he dropped the caber right there.
Well played.
He's challenged you. So let's see. Can we get to 25? Can we get to 36?
Yeah, it's a push goal just like in Kickstarter.
All right, help us out. All right, this movie that we're talking about today is So I Married Axe Murdere. It came out in 1993, and I actually remember going to the theater and seeing this with Michael because we had just started dating.
Probably.
Yeah, I totally remember seeing this with you because I saw it through like your Scott-loving eyes. So I don't think I would have appreciated it as much, and especially all the nuances of like the Bay City Rollers and all of the Scottish, nods.
As the listeners may be able to guess, there are 0 pauses when we see movies in the theater. So far, the projectionist hasn't agreed to stop the film when I hold up the 2-finger pause sign, but there would have been lots of pausing.
There would have been.
If we'd had that.
Yeah. Okay, so this is directed by Tommy Schlamme, which I love. He did The West Wing. He did Sports Night. Tracy Takes On, our favorite Studio 60. If you guys have not seen Studio 60, please look it up. It is a fabulous series that had only, I think, one season, but it's fabulous. And he was married to Christine Lottie. And I remember every time she would get up, she would thank her husband, Tommy Schlamme. And I just thought that was the coolest name. It stars Mike Meyers, Nancy Travis, Anthony LaPaglia, a very young Anthony LaPaglia, Amanda Plummer, Brenda Fricker, Charles Grodin, Phil Hartman, Debbie Mazar, Stephen Wright, and Alan Arkin. It is set in San Francisco, Oakland, meets of the world where Nancy Travis's character Harriet works, is now North Beach Pizza, which I remember going to when I lived in the Bay Area. And the writer is Robbie Fox, who also did Daddy Daycare, a favorite of our kids, and Playing for Keeps, and In the Army Now, that huge hit by
Pauly Shore.
Pauly Shore, thank you. It's a TriStar picture, and the synopsis is a San Francisco poet who fears commitment, suspects his girlfriend may have a knack for killing off her significant others. And the tagline is, "The honeymoon was a killer." So Mike, kick us off. What is the pickup line?
Excuse me, miss, there seems to be a mistake. I ordered the large cappuccino.
Which I was so impressed because as we were watching, there's this great, I guess, what'd you call it, tracking shot. They're like, you're following the coffee, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're following a cup of coffee through this stereotypical poet.
Yeah, Bohemian Coffee Club.
Yeah, in San Francisco, very San Francisco. And so it's like the POV of the waitress or waiter carrying the coffee. And you even said, I think he has a line like, and then you said almost the exact same line. And how many years later, 30, almost third, wait, almost.
To carry the two. It's almost 30 years later, 28.
Yeah, 30 years later, Mike, you knew the exact line. I was very impressed.
Based on quotability, this film does very well, except for, well, maybe there's one other of Mike Meyers as the poet Charlie. Most of the quotes are from his father, Mike Meyers playing the character's father, which is based on Mike Meyers' actual father, which apparently indicates that Scots are angry people.
Yeah.
Because the character of the father just shouts all the time in the film.
Yeah, between him and Brendan Vickers' character, his mom.
Right. May, I believe, is her name.
Yes,
May.
it is. May. That's all they do when they're on screen, is they just yell at each other.
Now, I've known some Scots, and I don't recall a lot of shouting, so maybe that was just for comic effect.
So he's talking to Anthony Paglia's character, and he kind of sets us up with a little bit of exposition. He says, every time you get close to a good woman, you come up with a reason to break up with them. So that lets us know that kind of just a little heads up what Mike is all about.
Well, that's setting up his character arc.
Yeah. Early in the film, I think right after this scene in the cafe, he is walking, or he's driving down the street in what kind of car? A little preview of our driving review.
It's a maroon Volkswagen Karmagia.
Okay. He's driving down the street and he passes Meats of the World meat market, which I wish we had a Meats of the World here.
Well, to me, it seems like it's the international version of Thunder from Down Under.
What? No.
Meats of the World? It seemed like it was...
Okay, I see where you're going, but I'm being serious. I want a butcher that has meat from all over the world. Like you could go get like fresh linguiça from Portugal. You could get, haggis. You could get bratwurst from Germany. Like I want that shop in Portland now.
Okay, it probably exists, and please reach out to us. We're happy to accept sponsors.
Exactly. So he's driving past and he sees her, I think she's putting out, like she's rolling up the shade or she's doing something to open up the store, and she's in her cute little Dutch girl outfit, and he dangerously so watches her more than the road.
Yeah. Now, in some sense, this is a film that's almost 30 years old because ultimately it was her appearance that got him interested. They had never spoken before. Now, once they do speak, things go well, but it is kind of an interesting setup.
Yeah. And then the next day, he goes in to buy haggis for his mom for, I believe, Burns Night. I think
that is in fact true.
Yeah. And so he goes in and she's just overwhelmed with customers. There's just so many people. And he says, well, I'll help. And I just want to know, like, how safe is it to walk into a butcher or to accept help from a perfect stranger that you will help butchering meat?
Well, did he have his food handler's card in his wallet?
Exactly.
Now, later in the film with exposition, they tell us that his father is a retired butcher, and that's how he knew his way around a butcher shop. Now, I will mention, though, that is fairly realistic because, as we have just established, if you do have a store called Meats of the World, it would be very busy because everyone loves the idea of meats from around the world.
Right. So it kicks off a music montage where Mike Meyers can kind of be Mike Meyers. He can goof off with the meat, doing all these different antics, which kind of I think I would leave the meat place if I saw somebody doing some of the stuff that he did.
Well, he was not particularly clean about like his gags. So those pieces of meat would all have to be thrown away, which I don't think butchers are rolling in the margin. So yeah, but it's comic hijinks.
Yeah.
And this is an interesting bit of trivia because in preparation for the role, Nancy Travis did some research with a butcher and she asked him what the most important part about being a butcher is. And he said, always look where you're cutting. And while she was doing that scene, Mike Myers was goofing off and she was not and had a little injury.
A little boo-boo?
A little boo-boo.
Which you said later you can see the Band-Aid on her finger.
That is correct in another scene, which was obviously shot after the boo-boo.
Right. I love right after this montage, there's a beautiful shot of the Golden Gate Bridge in the background and they're kind of, I think, walking down the street. And they go to her apartment and he gets kind of a little clue that maybe something, it doesn't really hit him immediately, but it's something that comes up later. She has some martial art equipment displayed on the wall and she says, oh, that was from an old boyfriend.
So at this point in the film, I was not sure exactly what was going on. Even though I saw the film 30 years ago and remembered some of the lines, it was well played that it was not immediately obvious what was going on. As the viewer, you know something is up. And so, of course, you're led to believe that she is this famous Mrs. X, right?
Right.
But it's done so in a way where you could still say, well, it could just be a coincidence. So as the character of Charlie gets more paranoid, then his friend Tony, I think is the name of the character played by LaPaglia.
Yes.
Does have that very natural reaction like, look, you're being paranoid. This is like nuts to think that this person who comes out of the newspaper. And what's really fun about that from a writing perspective, tip of the cap to Robbie Fox, is that his mother believes that the Weekly World News is gospel.
Remember that newspaper?
Oh, I do. Looking at it in the check stand when you're waiting, in line to check out, you'd read the cover with all the stupid things they'd say that are obviously not true. And so what makes this even funnier is there was a guy I went to college with who is very proud of his Scottish ancestry, whose mother read the Weekly World News and also swore that it was true. And this guy, bright guy, engineering college, said, well, some of the stories are true.
Oh, no.
Now, it's possible if you read the entire thing cover to cover, you'd find a couple.
One.
Right, yeah, like fire hydrants contain water or something like that. But it was really quite a fun little callback. So now I ask the question, are Scots particularly susceptible to not just whiskey, but also to the Weekly World News?
Maybe
is there something genetic?
And maybe they're connected.
You think if you drink a lot that it becomes more like plausible? Yeah, okay.
So after their first sexual encounter, she's fallen asleep and she's having a bad dream where she moans and says, Ralph, oh, Ralph. And so, of course, he wakes up and he's like, what the heck is going on here? And then they meet her sister, Rose, and she warns Charlie to be careful. So that kind of lets the audience know, if you didn't get a clue by the martial arts equipment and the bad dream, here you go. We're just going to put a pin in it and say the sister's warning him. Right.
And she's a little off, right? You can tell by the first interaction that there's something a little off, but it's portrayed as she's kind of artsy. And you think, okay, it's San Francisco, lives in a loft, got some weird stuff on the walls. maybe she's just kind of that artsy-fartsy kind of person and not legitimately not so.
Well, and I love Amanda Plummer's acting, but I do feel like in a way either she was typecast or she enjoys these roles. She always kind of plays kind of like the oddball. Mm-hmm. She played Dagmar from one of our favorite movies, Joe versus the Volcano. And she kind of plays a quirky character with almost like magical powers or, witchcraft. She always, I love it, but she kind of plays that oddball. So seeing her even kind of heightens the stakes anyway. So then they take a trip to Alcatraz, which as I was watching this scene, I was like, what is this? How is this informing the film? And as a producer, I was thinking, I can't even imagine. You pretty much are closing Alcatraz for probably the day, if not a half day, but probably the day. You have to boat, you have to ferry everybody from the crew over to the island. And there was nothing that informed the story by being on Alcatraz other than we got to see Phil Hartman playing Vicky as the tour guide.
But you can call me Vicky.
But I feel like they could have done the Ghirardelli tour and saved a whole lot of money and time, probably.
Actually, you could have put LaPaglia and Myers on a park bench with a hot dog and done the whole scene. You wouldn't even have to do the Ghirardelli tour or whatever.
No,
Ghirardelli
I know
tour.
that, but I'm saying if you wanted Phil Hartman to play a tour guide named Vicky,
oh yeah,
there's another way to do it.
Yeah, there's probably a bunch of tours you could take, like the Haight and kind of things like that. So all right.
Yeah, he could have been the weird guy down at Pier 39 talking about the sea lions or something. I mean, it was just wow.
But did Tommy Schlamme have it on his bucket list to film at Alcatraz? And he's like, this is a perfect opportunity. I tell the producers it's mandatory to the story and we just got to do it, boss. Find the money.
And then we have a dating montage where we see them doing all of the stereotypical things in San Francisco, going to the pier, going to the wharf, riding a ferry, walking past I call them the full house houses, it was in the opening of.
Yeah. I wish I knew, but that's every production that shoots in San Francisco shoots in that one little
park
greenery with the basically they're shared wall brownstones, but they're painted fun colors.
Yeah. And then they go meet his parents, which is one of the best scenes of the whole film.
Yes, you have to just really enjoy that character of his father, which, as I mentioned earlier, is based on Mike Meyers' father, who's a Scottish immigrant, which I think explains the Scottish Wall of Fame, which is one of my favorite, with Sean Connery and Jackie Stewart and all of those up on the wall. And in fact, in my own residence, there is a wall with photos of, I would call them famous, but relatives, and I call it the Wall of Fame in a nod, I think, to this film.
Yeah, you're right. We do have a lot of stuff in our family lexicon that comes from this film that I didn't even realize.
Right. And there is a lot of quotable lines here. And part of it is I think it's a younger brother, a younger person that lives in the household. And the father is just awfully abusive to him. There's no way around it.
So mean.
And he'd paper, no, is but then he refers to his head as a virtual planetoid.
Yeah.
That can't be good for that. And then he'll cry himself to sleep on his giant pillow. It's really amazing. But also from, I think, a writing perspective, there's some stuff in there that's going on that's, I think, kind of subtle. So his mother, May, chain smokes. But as some people may know, Glasgow is known for its tobacconists, its cigarette factories. So I think that would map with him being from Glasgow. And it's a nice touch, although perhaps not good for her lungs. It at least, works. But then you see when LaPaglia's character, Tony, comes, she has this great line, "You've turned into a right sexy wee bastard." And what is it about the mother that she's trying to jump poor old LaPaglia's bones the entire film?
It reminded me of Four Christmases when they were all of her family,
yeah,
all of
exactly.
her aunts and grandparent and grandma were hitting on Vince Vaughn.
Yeah. Which is funny because at one point in the film, Anthony LaPaglia's character is dressed what he thinks is a pimp, and Charlie says, you look like, Huggy Bear from Starsky and Hutch, which I think in 93 was maybe a topical enough reference, but I think nowadays is going to be rough.
Yeah. So when he's in the bathroom with the Wall of Fame, he sees the Daily World News report, and he sees the story about, is it Madam X and her 3 victims. And he sees that one was a martial arts expert, and I can't remember but there was
a plumber named Ralph. That's where Ralph came from.
Right. And then there was the third one that he also kind of had
there's like Russian at some point. And so when they're at another famous landmark on one of their dates, she interacts with some Russian sailors.
That's right.
To establish that she speaks fluent Russian, which, by the way, I don't know that there's a lot of Russian ships that docked in San Francisco in 93.
Well, I mean,
that was Cold War.
Though.
Yeah, but that was back when we didn't like them.
It had a fleet week.
Sure, why not?
And then after that, he's seen using the Thigh Master, which you were talking about references. I think in 93, people would have recognized the Thigh Master. Would people today know what that even was?
I doubt it, and I doubt that anybody would recognize or who could tell us who was the big proponent and celebrity spokesmodel for the Thigh Master.
All right, you guys, email us.
Right. Okay. I will say Superfan Lee probably knows.
Yes.
But go ahead and email us, everyone, and let us know your answer.
Yeah. We're going to get texts from our 2 listeners. First one gets a prize. How about that?
Yeah, I'll figure something out.
Okay. And then there's this closet gag. After he uses the Thigh Master and it, comedy hijinks, it springs across the room. Then he goes into this closet and immediately, and the closet has a full glass door. And I immediately said, like, why would a closet have a glass door?
It wouldn't.
Most people's closets, except for like the rich and famous now who make their closets, like showrooms. Most people in 1993 would have a really messy closet. You never have a glass door in your closet because you shove everything in there. And I was like, I even said it out loud. Wait, why is there a glass door? And then he goes in there, and then it's this total gag where everything in the closet falls down, even like ridiculously slow, like more contents that really could even fit in that closet and could even be up on the top shelf to fall down on him.
You mean it's almost like there's 3 grips standing on ladders dumping crap on Mike Meyers?
Yeah, totally. And I was just like, okay, that just annoyed me. It wasn't even funny. And it was just like, come on, Mike, you're better than that.
Well, again, maybe that was what Tommy Schlamme traded for the Alcatraz. Like, okay, we'll do the closet gag, Mike.
But damn it, I'm going to Alcatraz.
We're going to Alcatraz. And Meyer said, only if there's someone named Vicky. And Schlamme said, great, I know Phil Hartman. We'll make it happen.
So I love this film for its points of interest that it shows in San Francisco that I just have a fondness for being there when in my early 20s. There's Pier 39, there's the Buena Vista Cafe where they get Irish coffees, and Ghirardelli Square and the cable cars. So that's always fun to see. So his friend Tony tells him that a suspect has turned himself in for the murder of Ralph Elliott, who I think was one of the victims of Mrs. X. And so he had broken up with her because when he saw the newspaper, he freaked out and he broke up with her. So then he called up and said, oh, I want you back. And she rejects him. And so then, because he's a poet, he goes back to the poet slam. And my favorite line was, you hard-hearted harbinger of haggis, which I thought was hilarious.
Right.
And then they make up and they're in this huge bathtub that is just like ridiculously large. And she goes downstairs to get something and he comes down and there's Ralph. And Ralph turns out to be a girl. So it's like, oh, see, everything's fine. She didn't kill those people and Ralph's a girl, not a boy. And here we have a chance for Mike Meyers' towel to fall. And we have an extra long shot of his very pale butt.
And I'm not really sure, again, what the humor was there. I think normal people would have reacted a lot differently than his character did.
Well, how many people would walk downstairs with just the towel where just the corner's tucked in?
Yeah.
As you walk, it starts to fall off. Everybody holds it.
The moment you see that there's people you don't know, you do a hard 180 and go put some clothes on.
Yeah, I better go grab a bathrobe because her friend's here.
Or as you said, if not, both hands go on the hem of the towel, right, to keep that sucker up. Nobody wants it.
Right.
Like You have opposable thumbs for a reason, but that's not important right now.
Yeah. So then they go to a bar called the Cock of the North, which is now the Edinburgh Castle Pub. And it's a very 90s music.
Oh, yeah. Like when they're going out to Alcatraz, they have that one song that I always misheard as Little Miss Happy Frog.
You always mishear the lyrics.
Which, by the way, sounds like a really fun bar in Japan. Little Miss Happy Frog.
Yeah. So they kind of get back together. They're getting married. And at the end of the wedding, they famously, I can't remember what happens to the piper, but he goes, what happened to him? I forgot.
I don't remember now, but
Did
he
he
takes
get
a fall.
drunk or?
That would be on brand.
Right. And so he fell over and his father exclaims,
Piper down, piper down.
And I realized at that moment when I think you reiterated that line like you did just then, you know your cue. We had a bagpiper at our wedding and we actually had a piper down. I hope it didn't happen at the wedding, but the morning of the wedding, my mom got a call and the piper that she had hired, I think either he got into a car accident or his daughter got into a car accident. And so he was sending a buddy who was like our backup piper. So it didn't affect the wedding. We still had the songs there that we wanted, Scotland the Brave and Amazing Grace. But the minute he said piper down, I was like, oh, we had a piper down.
Right. Hopefully he also recovered.
So Tony works for the San Francisco Police Department and he gets a tip that actually Harriet is she is Madam X. She is the killer. And so this requires Stephen Wright, who I would think at the time was a big enough star to just have this tiny little part. So I don't know if he was just friends with Mike and doing Mike a favor or, but he's flying the plane and Charles Grodin is driving the car that Tony needs Charles Grodin's driving by and Tony needs to commandeer his car, which of course, then I think had to pause to talk about, that line that was in a lot of 80s and 90s movies. I need to commandeer this vehicle.
And I think there's no actual justification for commandeering. I suppose a police officer couldn't request that you drive them places or give them your car. I don't know, but I don't think that they can commandeer anything, which is funny because then Grodin's character is like, no, just in a very bland way. No, I'm not going to give you my car.
Right.
So instead, he does end up driving LaPaglia, which I have to say, there are some of us, including this respondent, who would enjoy having a police officer say, please drive me to a location as fast as possible. I mean, that's just giving you permission to drive fast.
Right. Follow that car.
Yeah, exactly.
Step on it, right? You would love that permission.
Oh my gosh, it would be awesome.
So at the place where they're having the honeymoon, this is another like trope that you always, the phone is brought to the table in a restaurant with like the tremendously long cord. And I always thought, how does that even happen? Now that would be, it's even in the 90s, there had to have been cordless phones that they could have brought to the table, but instead they bring this phone.
Okay. Now, one of the things that we worry about a lot on sets for safety is putting gaff tape on top of all of the cables so people don't trip and fall.
Yeah.
And then yet at this high-end restaurant, they're going to have 78 feet of like telephone cord
with numerous octogenarians around
and snakes through the tables to get maximum number of broken hips.
Yeah. And waiters and waitresses carrying trays of food. Yeah. That's a great idea.
Absolutely no sense.
Right. So he gets the call from Tony that says, she is Madam X, you're in danger, get out of there. And then it cuts out because there's a lightning storm. So he has to run around the hotel avoiding her and she doesn't know why. Now, why he doesn't just turn around and say, I know you're Madam X, get away from me and stay in the dining room where all the people are. No, he goes up to his room where he can be alone with her.
Right. So one of the rules is never go to the second location.
Right.
Also, remain where there are witnesses.
Exactly. And so then he finds a note just as Rose, her sister, has an axe over his head and narrowly misses him with the axe. And so then it's like, oh, Harriet isn't the killer. It's Rose. She doesn't want anybody to be married to her sister. And so she kills them.
I will have a little stunt interjection here in that when he's hanging onto the roof, edge of the roof, and she's attacking with the axe, our question was, how did they do that? Because it was obviously real hands, not fake hands. And I did think perhaps they did the trick where they film it in reverse. That they put the axe in there, then he puts his hand and she pulls it out, but then they reverse the film and it goes the other way during post-production. That could be how they do it, but it is kind of a frightening stunt if it was actually done, live, because there's some fingers right next to that axe.
Right. And then Tony actually saves, because then Rose is almost falling to her death and Tony saves her, but then takes her to jail because she tried to kill his buddy. And then the movie ends with a poetry, beat poetry.
Woman.
Yeah. Just like it started.
Yeah.
So, was there any head trauma?
There was, in fact, head trauma. It was during that weird closet junk scene. About 48 minutes in, a bunch of stuff falls on Charlie's head when he's hiding in the closet.
And I know they kissed.
Smoochy, smoochy, smoochy.
Because they were dating and smooching.
Right.
And
I have two smoochies. One at 1 hour, 7 seconds when Harriet and Charlie are having a bath together in the inexplicably large bathtub. And another about 4 minutes later when Harriet accepts Charlie's proposal.
Aww. And I hope I didn't step on any of your driving review, but could you give us a full driving review of the film?
Well, there's really one car that's featured. This is this 73 maroon Volkswagen Karmagia. Now, a brief aside is that for a fellow who lives in San Francisco in the 90s, it's possible the Karmagia was advertising a little bit differently than maybe that was a car that was very common with our gay friends. It was a crappy version. You can tell they did a little bit to show you that he's a poet and he's broke because the bright work, the little chrome strips don't line up on the car. So that says to the viewer, oh, it's not a collector car. He's not a person who's driving as a collector. This is just basically a crappy old VW, but it's a convertible, which even though it doesn't rain so much, it's pretty cold in the evenings there. Convertibles are kind of a brave move. There was another vehicle, right, is the Cessna 172 piloted by Stephen Wright. Not sure about whether that was realistic or not. I haven't been in a 172, so I can't tell you if the cockpit was realistic, but it looked a little large for the actual aircraft to me, so I don't think they filmed it in a plane. But I will second your note that eyes on the road, Charlie. The character of Charlie is an extremely inattentive driver.
So, you know how we've talked about before, this is going to date not only me, but both of us. So all you youngins, just hang tight while I explain this. But do you remember how we were talking about, I used to think that P Isadora, I thought her name was like the letter P.
Right.
Like that was her first initial. And then her last name was Isadora.
Mm-hmm.
So Karmagia, I always thought that was like karma, like, if you do something good, good comes to you. Karma, and then Gia. I didn't know it was Carmen. Like I can hear that you're saying Carmen, like a flamenco dancer.
It's spelled a little differently, but yeah, I always heard it as car mangia, right? And I didn't know what a mangia was, and so I thought it was Italian, not German. What kind of car do you have? I am a Gia.
All right, you guys, if you have anything like that, send it to us so we can laugh. All right. Are we ready for the numbers?
Sure, let's go to the numbers.
All right. Like I said, this came out in 1993. The budget was $20 million. Yeah, because you went out to Alcatraz. You could have saved some. Let's see. IMDb score of 6.5. Rotten Tomatoes gave it a 51%. So I think, is that fresh? I don't know.
That's on the border, right?
Yeah, it's right there. And the audience liked it a little bit better. They gave it 68%. It's an hour and 33 minutes. It's rated PG-13. It's a romantic comedy. We paused twice to talk trivia, so very little for us. That's low for us.
Yeah.
And it was not released worldwide, and domestically it only made $11.5 million. So it was kind of considered, I would say, like a flop, but I do believe it has like a cult, maybe not quite a cult status, but I know that the people, like when we posted that I was watching this, everybody was like, oh my God, I love that movie. And so I think it lives fondly in people's memories.
Yeah, I think it's actually a pretty good movie, pretty funny, pretty watchable. So some of the lack of box office success is a little bit surprising to me.
Uh-huh.
And also at that time, I think Mike Meyers was kind of at the height of his...
I know. I was surprised when I saw.
So that is interesting.
Yeah. And actually, I was a little concerned that I was going to be bored because I'd already seen it and I didn't remember it as fondly,
Right.
but I actually enjoyed watching it this second time.
Yeah. I think a little bit of Mike Meyers probably goes a long way. So if you'd watched a bunch of Mike Meyers films and then watched it, it might be a little much, a little over. But I think ultimately, in my opinion, Nancy Travis is very appealing. As we've talked about before, that rom-com female lead is a very difficult role to cast. And I think she does a very good job. She's both gorgeous as well as approachable. And that's a tough trick to pull off.
Yeah, I remember her from 3 Men and a Little Lady, or 3 Men and a Baby. I think she was in the original 3 Men and a Baby. She was the lady that left her baby. All right, guys, that is it for this week's podcast. Thank you for listening. Remember, please leave us a review so you guys can all see Mike in his infinite glory. He did look quite stunning, very royal.
Well, thank you.
Tune in next week when we're going to talk about Restless Natives, a new movie to us, but we had to round out our choice of Scottish films. We have actually seen all the other Scottish films, and this one actually, I'm happy we saw it. It's kind of cute. So we'll talk about Restless Natives next week, and never forget, guys,
Dodges never stop, and neither do the movies.
Thanks for listening to Dodge Movie Podcast with Christy and Mike Dodge of Dodge Media Productions. To find out more about this podcast and what we do, go to dodgemediaproductions.com. Subscribe, share, leave a comment, and tell us what we should watch next. Dodges never stop, and neither do the movies.